Next we want to introduce Roberto Martinez from Bulletproof, where he's you can see beside there. I don't have to read it for you, right? Roberto is a veteran of BSides talks, and so I asked everybody to tell me something interesting about themselves, something that most people don't know, how many B-sides have you spoken at? 4. Okay, and so that includes not just here, but in Colombia as well. So he's a bilingual B-side speaker, which is amazing. And then he also was a security researcher at Kaspersky dealing with APTs. So I think we're going to learn a lot from him. So please welcome Roberto.
Thank you, everyone. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for having me today. This is my first conference here in Canada, and this was the last piece to present in different countries in America. Actually, I presented before in some countries in Europe and Latin America, Caribbean, previously besides Sao Paulo, Colombia, Mexico City, and first besides North America. So I'm going to present today something related to threat hunting, but not the regular threat hunting. So I want to start answering this question because sometimes there is some confusion regarding the threat hunting. What is cyber threat hunting? Because sometimes we can confuse threat hunting with threat detection. It's different because threat detection, it's about how to use the resources we have to improve our detection, but in a linear way. And when you do threat hunting, you are assuming that you are missing something, that your tools are missing something. Your tools are not detecting some threats. So this is the definition of David Yanko. Hunting is any manual or semi-automated method of finding new security incidents that were missed by automated detection. So that means that if we just trust in the tools we have to detect, we could be missing something. So this is why it's important to have a threat hunting approach. We need to change our posture from reactive, just using the tools we have, to a different posture, in this case, proactive posture. So how can we be proactive to detect different threats? Well, in this case, it's very important because, as you know, cyber threats are evolving. Cyber threats are sophisticated. Sometimes they are using actually the same tools that we have in our systems. They use leading of the land tools. They are not using specific special tools. They are using the tools that are in the system, in the applications. So, in this way, the best approach to protect the organization is to try to find what could be wrong in our infrastructure, in our devices. The main goal here is to try to detect threats before those threats will have an impact or make an impact to our organizations. I know that sometimes it's very difficult to detect everything, so you need to focus just to detect the things that could be, in some cases, undetectable. But how can we do that? This is an example. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. That way? Okay. Yours. There? Okay. So, for example, what happened in the ransomware attacks? In ransomware attacks, we're assuming that the main factor that could affect us, it could be the malware. But actually, the encryption of the files is the last phase of the attack. I mean, something wrong happened before. A lot of things happened before. And the problem is that we are not detecting that part. We are not detecting what happened when a company could be compromised. A threat actor could use a specific initial vector of attack, and then the attacker will move through the network, will use the same infrastructure of the company to escalate privilege, to multilaterality, and do different things. So the last parts of a ransomware attack actually are the exfiltration of files and the encryption of the files. So the idea with threat hunting is to try to catch these behaviors before an impact occurs. So the first thing, we need to have a hunter mindset. I mean, hunter mindset means that we need to think like a hunter. A hunter hunts. A hunter needs to have enough information about, in this case, the adversaries. So we need actually to know the adversary. What kind of company is the company where are we working for? What industry? What are the specific threats for our companies? Because there are different threat actors and different threats for every industry. The other thing that we need to consider is that it's not just a malware thing or a hacking thing. It's about motivation. It's about what the potential attackers are looking for in our organization. It could be a financial motivation, it could be cyber espionage. So we need to understand what threat actors are looking for. This is the best way to try to figure out how can we protect, how can we detect every threat for the organization. So, for example, if we think in a threat actor that actually is targeting a particular organization, the key chain is not linear. I mean, it's not like a step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. The attacks are more like random. Sometimes the attackers find a best ways to complete the next step that they want to follow. But the main thing is, what are they looking for? If they are looking for information, where we have the information, what privilege is needed to have access to that information. So we need to build a strategy. This strategy needs to be based on the information we have about the threat actors. Another thing we need to consider is to have or to follow a framework. It's important because you need a methodology to do your work. You need a methodology to do your threat hunt. There are different methodologies. The most important thing is that that methodology works for you. So you can actually mix some different things from different methodologies. And the approach you will need to have is to focus specifically in what behaviors will be present in a compromise or cyber attack. For example, this is a methodology from MyIngenuity, where they focus particularly on understand the different models of activities, malicious activities, obviously, and following the might attack framework, they try to map these behaviors with particular detection. Another interesting thing to consider is David Bianco pyramid of pain. In this case, obviously, every spot is good. I mean, if you detect something like, for example, you detect something by the hash, it's good. it's perfect. You detect something by doing IP detections, domain detection is good, but it's pretty easy to change. I mean, the threat actor could change any signature. The threat actor could change IP address, domains. So I remember incident response I worked for, the attack was in process. So I remember that I found a malicious file or suspicious file. I analyzed the file, and then I figured out that that file was not detected for any antivirus. I mean, the attackers worked on this particular sample and was not detected for any antivirus. So the thing I did, I sent the sample to add the detection for that particular malware. And I think it was like 2 hours after that, I discovered that the sample was not detected anymore. So I reviewed the signature of the file, and I discovered that the threat actors changed the sample. They recompilate the sample, and they change, obviously, the hash. So this is trivial to detect. So the best way to focus on detection is to focus on the behaviors. I mean, behaviors are not easy to change. So this is why it's important, it's an important piece of threat hunting. And the baseline of everything is cyber threat intelligence. If you have good intelligence, you can create good detections. You can do great hunts. You can work with great hunts. So it's important to have a good sources of information. It's important to have knowledge about the threat actors, about their particular techniques that they are using. And there are some tools. Currently, cybersecurity companies are including mappings, for example, in their reports to my attack. Okay, this is the threat intelligence report, and they provide sometimes the mapping of these particular behaviors or some particular behaviors to my attack. But if it's not the case, there are another tools like Fredericton. This is an open source and automated tool where you can just translate reports in PDF, HTML, ML to particular or specific techniques. In that way, you can understand what the attackers are doing in their attacks. Another important thing is your hunting tool set. I like this tweet from Fredericton. He is one of the creators of Sigma rules. They mention that it's important to work with rules. And I agree with him because, you know, if you are assuming your current tools are not detecting everything and possible you are missing something, that means that you need to focus in different ways to try to detect threats. So imagine that a sample or an implant that is not detected for any antivirus, and you try to detect using the antivirus, obviously it will not be detected. So you need to create or use different tools. In this case, it's very important to be agnostic. You can use different tools. There are a lot of open source tools that you can use, but from the agnostic point of view. And the creation of rules is a great way to do that, because the rules are generic. It doesn't matter what technology you have. It doesn't matter what security tools you have. It doesn't matter how you are monitoring, or if you are not monitoring some things. So there are different types of tools to do that. You can create rules to detect tools or malware, like the Jara rules. I don't know if you are familiar with Jara rules. It's a great way to detect tools or implants. Suricata to detect malicious traffic, and Sigma rules to detect specific behaviors. So this is a cool example. How can you use Java rules? It's not just about to detect the file itself. You need to find the tracks, you know? You need to think like a hunter. For example, there is a threat actor with a neutron. This threat actor has particularly financial motivation. So they install code to sign certificates. So in that way, they could sign specific or malicious DLLs. So when we have access to those samples, we compare particular or specific information, in this case, the timestamp. And if you compare the timestamp, obviously because they were using stolen information to sign certificates to obviously hide in plain sight, the same timestamp was present in every sample and actually in DLLs of the system. So this is an interesting thing. How can I detect that? Because if my antivirus don't detect that, if my monitoring tools are not detecting that, what can I do? In this case, if you have threat intel, if you have enough information about the samples, you can create a Jira rule. What particularly thing has these specific samples? Well, in this case, the timestamp, because the timestamp was the same in every file. In this case, in some files of the system. For example, this is a Jira rule, a pretty simple Jira rule, where you just define the timestamp and compare any file that have a size, minor size, than the original ones of the system ones. In that way, you could detect the malware and you could avoid detection of false positives, in this case, system files. So this is a pretty good example of how can you use Jira rules to detect something initially undetectable. Okay? There is another cool example, UEFI rootkits. In this case, there are different threats around these particular implants. So threat actors are looking to use these implants because are not detectable at the beginning. You know, because these implants are not in the hard disk. These implants are in the firmware. So it doesn't matter if you format your hard disk. It doesn't matter if you actually change your hard disk. The implant will be there. Okay? Currently, antivirus scan that part of your computer, but before that, you can detect that. So this is why in cyber espionage campaigns, the threat actors look to do that. It could be compromising a third party or using the technique known like evil mail. I don't know if you heard before about evil mail. You know, you leave your computer in your hotel room, and then a threat actor will have access to your room, and then have access to your computer, and install the implant. In this case, an implant directly to your firmware. There was a particular operation called Shadow Hammer. I don't know if you are familiar with this campaign. In the Shadow Hammer campaign, threat actors compromise third party. We're talking about supply chain attack. Well-known computer manufacturer. So they compromise the code in that way that if you have a computer for this brand, you could be backdoored by this implant. New computers, or if you updated your firmware. So that was pretty interesting. So how can you hunt these kind of threats? Imagine that your anti-malware don't detect this. If you have enough information, again, like a threat intelligence, you can first dump the content of the firmware. Is the first part. Remember, we are hunting. We are following the tracks, you know? So in this case, we can use the tools, the own tools from the system, or we can use external tools. There are different tools to dump the firmware. So in this case, you can get the firmware. This is the first part. The second part is eliminating all sensitive information from the dump. This is important because there are sensitive information in the firmware. And that's it. And after that, you will parse the dump in an understandable way. Okay? You can do similar things. For example, if you have a memory dump, you did a memory dump from a suspicious computer, you can just get the executables from the memory, and then you can scan using URLs. For example, I detect a lot of times the presence of mimikatz in the memory from potentially computers compromised in ransomware attacks. So in that way, you know that the attackers does not encrypt the information. They have actually the passwords of the users. So you need to do something with that. So the last part is you can use a URL and you can just scan the content of that dump. So this is the way that you can detect specific threats, for example, from firmware. So the other way that you can hunt is using Sigma rules. In this case, Sigma rules are pretty interesting because the thing is there are different manufacturers, there are different providers to monitor and detect specific threats. But you know that they are using different queries to try to detect threats. So the challenge here is what happens if my company has a particular tool to monitor or detect, and then they decide to change to another one. Or in this case, for example, if you are external or you are a provider, what happens if one client has particular technology and other client that have different technology? So the creators of Sigma thought that it would be a good idea to create a standard rule, a standard structure or information to detect different threats, and then use different conversions to create particular queries. So in that way, I can have one rule to detect specific behavior, and then I can convert that rule in a particular query. So this is the way that works. For example, you can look for a specific Sigma rule, or you can create actually your own Sigma rule. So in the same way that you use Java rules, you can create a Sigma rule, and then, or you can look for a Sigma rule associated with maybe an exploitation of vulnerability or a particular threat. For example, when a threat actor tried to get the passwords from the LSAS process using proc-dump, this is a behavior, a well-known behavior. So you can create a Sigma rule to detect if someone is trying to use proc-dump to get the passwords or the process from the LSAS system. So in this case, this is a Sigma rule. Are similar that the Java rules, but are different. Similar in the way that have a structure, are created to create detections or to do detections, and the next step is convert this rule Well, this is another example where you can look for rules specifically designed to threat hunting. For example, there are rules that you can use in incident response, there are rules that you can use in threat hunting. But the most important thing is that you develop the capacity to create your own rules, because the environment will change, obviously. The threats will change. So you first need to be familiar with the different techniques that an attacker could use, and then you can create or you can use the Sigma rules. Well, there are different tools that you can use to convert. For example, there are converters online, or you can use the main converter using the Sigma engine to create a conversion. And after that, here. Okay, for example, there. You just need to use a rule, and with Sigma rules, you can detect behaviors. This is the way. And also, you can use Suricata rules. Suricata is an open source tool created to detect malicious behaviors on the traffic, the network traffic. You can use Suricata, just importing the pickup files. For example, if you capture some traffic from a network, you can just import that information to Suricata and use the rules to detect potential threats. There are also tools that you can use more like from the incident response and threat hunting perspective. For example, Velociraptor. This is a pretty good tool. Initially, it was just an open source tool. Now it's part of a company, but they keep Velociraptor as open source. So this tool is pretty interesting because you can just use a server in your own computer. You can start a server. You don't need to install anything. For example, let's assume that you are hunting in the particular infrastructure. So you don't have tools to monitor or to try to hunt for a particular threat. You can just run Velociraptor in your own computer, and you will have your infrastructure, the infrastructure you need to start the hunt. The way you can do the hunts, you can have, you can create collectors. A collector can get different pieces of evidence. For example, artifacts. You can get logs. You can get specific information from, for example, registry keys. You can get information, forensic information about the programs that were executing in a particular computer. And then you can start hunting using this platform. You can use the command line tools, or you can use the main dashboard. So, for example, in this case, we are creating collectors to get information about the target. A way that I use Velociraptor is, for example, if you need to get a memory dump from a computer or a server, you can just create a collector, get the evidence, and then you can analyze using Jara, using different tools like memory analysis tools. And the other way you can use Velociraptor is to deploy Jara logs, because not all the tools support Jara to do hunts. So, for example, if you have tools to monitor or detect threats, but your tool doesn't support Java rules, you can use, for example, the Raptor, and you can add your Java rules, your collection of Java rules, or a particular Java rule, and then you can look for data-specific samples in the different computers in the network. So in this case, we provide the Java rule. Another interesting thing is not just for detection. For example, in this case, if the Java rule detects something, you can get the sample as well. A malicious file, etc., you can get the sample. And you can get the sample and analyze the sample. And you can use Java rules to try to figure out what is the scope of the impact. I mean, what amount of devices are compromised. Because sometimes you can detect a sample or an implant in a computer, but you actually don't know if that implant is present in another computers. So the best way to do that is just to use your Java rule, you deploy your search to different computers in your network, and then you can get the samples in case the detections are positives. Like in this case, we got some detections, and the next part is to review the results, and if there are detections, you can got the samples. Yeah. So it's very important that you have the mindset of a hunter. You need to have enough information about the threat actors, about their behaviors, what kind of tools, what kind of techniques they are using for. But most important, we need to focus specifically in particular things. Like sometimes you can start doing hunt based on hypotheses. Like you don't have any information. You just create a hypothesis and then you start looking for different threats. Another way is if you have a particular threat intelligence report, for example, that about a threat actor that is attacking companies related with your industry, you can get that threat intelligence report and use to try to figure out if you were previously compromised. Actually, I recall one time that customer had the Microsoft Exchange infrastructure. So we read an threat intelligence report that that particular vulnerability was exploited by ransomware threat actors. So the first thing that we thought that that could be dangerous. So we start doing the hunt based on that particular threat intelligence report, and we found that the company actually was compromised. The threat actor was in the initial phases of the attack. So that was pretty interesting because that proactive posture will help you to detect threats before that threats will impact your organization. So you need to have a methodology to follow. You need to have the tool sets. Remember, it's very important to have an agnostic mindset. Because if you just focus in technologies, in specific technologies, we could miss something. So this is why you need to use complementary tools. This is why it would be a good idea to use, in this case, you can use open source tools or anything that will help to find something if you couldn't detect it before. And the next thing is to define what strategy you will follow to do your hunt. For example, it is based on hypotheses, just a threat intelligence report, and then convert that in actually detections. The way that threat hunting could help you to improve your security posture is to provide you enough information to create better detections in the future. So as conclusion, cyber threats, as you know, is a very important component in your organization. So sometimes it could be confused with threat detections. It's different. Threat hunting is an approach more proactive with proactive activities. And in that way, you can minimize the impact for your organization. Okay, so any questions so far? Yes? Yes. Yes. Yes, that's great. Yes, that's good. Yes. Yes. Well, in that case, that's a pretty interesting question. What happened, for example, you can do threat hunt based on threat intelligence reports, right? But that means that that threat is known. I mean, that happened before. So that happened to someone before. But what happened if you are, for example, compromised by a new attack or a new implant that never seen before? Well, in this case, it's better if you focus in the behaviors. I mean, the behaviors doesn't change. For example, if a new malware trying to get information from the network, the malware needs to do some recognize activity. So in that case, that behavior could be detected in some way. So sometimes, if you look for the Might Attack framework, you can see different tactics and techniques. So imagine that a threat actor is using a particular technique. Sometimes that technique, it could be detected in, for example, if there are 10 ways to generate the same behavior, maybe some tools could detect the half, or 5 or 6, but are missing 3, for example. So in this case, if you focus on the behavior, maybe you can help to detect the other 3 ways to generate the same behavior. In that case, you can use the approach of hypothesis threat hunting. Like, okay, let's assume that the threat actor is trying to do that. So you can create your threat hunt plan, and then you can try to find those behaviors. Yeah. Yes. 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 That's correct. Yes. Yes. Yes, that's correct. The main idea is to try to minimize the impact or to try to detect the behavior on time. Yeah. Anything else? I didn't hear your question, but it's related maybe with how do you avoid false positives? Yes, that's a good question because there is a challenge when you are doing threat hunting, you know? Because, for example, imagine that threat actors are using minimum of the line tools, like a BitSadmin or any tool present on the system. How can I differentiate the use of the BitSadmin to download information from internet or to share information between your computers and your network and a malicious behavior, like a download from a specific URL and with obfuscated malware, not detected malware, for example. This is pretty interesting because sometimes you need to look around that behavior, the next behaviors. So you need to change, to create a chain, between the first behavior and the next behaviors. Like, okay, if I can get the behavior A plus the behavior B plus the behavior C, that's a threat. And it's different than a regular behavior. So, yeah. Well, in this case, you need to be familiar with the normal to look for the abnormal, to detect that. Yeah, that's very important. This is why you need to have enough knowledge about how threat actors abuse of the regular tools to try to figure out the point of detection in this case. Yeah. Anything else? Yes.
For threat hunting program, now in a big enterprise organization have
Yes.
do you think it's possible to reach a good steady state where you're okay? I've covered all the behaviors, I've put protections in, new threat intel comes in, identifies the behavior now what that protection is something like that possible given how many different hypotheses you have, or is it more so a case that you can reduce the response, but you always have gaps, like let's say imagine always vulnerability you never get a gap.
Yeah. Well, you need to combine different strategies. For example, obviously you can't run a lot of hypotheses because you don't have maybe enough time or resources to do that. Maybe you can get threat intelligence information, so you need to figure out what is happening in the industry, what is happening in the threat landscape, because in that way you can define a strategy. Obviously, always could be the possibility that you can have a gap in the detection. But remember, there are different steps that an attacker will follow. So the thing is that maybe you can miss the first steps, but if you can detect, I don't know, in the middle of attack to the attackers, that is a win, because the main objective is to reduce the risk to be impacted for that attack. So, but it's possible to do that, but you need to define a strategy. You need to define your program, your methodology. In that way, you could improve the way that you are doing your hunts. Yeah. It's not a one-time task. It's a program that you need to repeat every time. Thank you.